Can you tell if this was a good dink? If so, why? If you just started playing pickleball, or maybe you're someone who's now playing at an intermediate level, the chances are that you may have already heard these advices on dinks already. For example, dink cross court, keeping the ball low, aiming the dink deep in the kitchen, hitting the ball at the opponent's feet, and many more. Well, these are all valid helpful tips, but I do think some of them can be very situational. And this begs the question, at the most basic and fundamental level, what exactly is considered a good and effective dink? In this video, I'm going to show you how I visually analyzed many dink shots of my own and how I concluded what a good dink shot is and what it looks like. But before we get there, we first need to understand what is a dink shot and what's the purpose of a dink shot. According to USA Pickleball, a dink is a soft shot hit on the bounce from the non-volley zone intended to arc over the net and land within the opposing non-volley zone, either straight across or diagonally cross court. And I do think this is a very good definition of a dink at the most fundamental level. Now, let's explore the purpose of a dink shot and why we do it in pickleball. First and foremost, a dink shot is a defensive shot and its primary objective is to prevent your opponents from either maintaining or gaining offensive advantages. In other words, it's a safe shot to minimize your chances of being attacked by your opponents. There is, however, a secondary objective to dinks, and that is to create offensive opportunities for you and your team to put the balls away and win the points. Now we know what a dink shot is and what the purpose is. Let's analyze and compare a few dinks and see what we can learn from them. Let me bring myself out to the other side of the court. First, I'm going to be acting as my own opponent, having my knees bent and my arms stretched out. This red line on the screen is going to mark my maximum reach for being able to hit the ball out of the air. Then I'm going to ask myself to come out again and stand in the ready position. So I'm going to hit a couple of dinks here. And let's pause and overlay the two shots together. If you look at the trajectory of the ball as it approaches the paddle of the dummy on the left hand side, this is a ball that can quite easily be attacked out of the air with an aggressive volley. Remember, the primary goal of a dink is to make it difficult for your opponent to attack you, so this is a bad dink. Now let's look at the second shot here. You'll notice that even though both shots started off with the exact same angle and trajectory, but the second shot peaks much earlier than the first shot, and when it lands on the other side of the net, it's just short enough to be outside the reach of the dummy's paddle to take the ball out of the air with any threat. Then the ball eventually bounces off the ground and peaks at the dummy's knees. Let's pay close attention to the trajectory of the balls as they cross the net. So on the bad dink, which is the first shot, the ball is just reaching its peak as it flies horizontally across the net, whereas on a good dink, the ball is already going down as it crosses the net. The other difference you'll see here is that the good dink reaches its peak roughly a foot before the net, whereas the bad ball peaks right above the net. Let's now take a look at the next two dinks. These two dinks are obviously very high and exaggerated on purpose. Both balls clear the net with a plenty of margin. However, the first shot is a much better dink than the second shot, for the same reasons as before. The second shot can be quite easily attacked out of the air by the dummy with an aggressive volley, whereas the first shot is just short enough to be outside the maximum reach for a volley. Now, because this is a very high dink, so the ball eventually bounces off the ground quite high, bringing it close to the height of the net cord, making it potentially an attackable ball. But I would still rather my opponent attacks me off the bounce than out of the air, which in my opinion is far more threatening. I think this is a good example where both things are not great, but by simply making sure the ball peaks somewhere before the net, the ball will be on the downward trajectory as it crosses the net, therefore making a significant difference to the end result. In this case, with the first shot, you're removing the possibility of being attacked out of the air, whereas with the second shot, the opponent can choose either to attack out of the air or attack off the bounce. Relatively speaking, the first dink is a far better shot than the second dink. And before I dive into the next two sets of interesting examples, I just want to thank you for taking your time to watch this video. And if you found this video helpful in any way, it would really help me out if you could support me by liking this video and subscribe to this channel for more content like this in the future. And don't forget to share this video with friends and family who are also struggling with thinking. Now let's move on to the next example. I think this is another very interesting comparison where both dinks are quite low. They both reach the peak at around the same height. If you just look at where the second dink lands, you may think it's a very good and aggressive dink that's landed deep in the kitchen close to the feet, applying a lot of pressure. But quite the opposite, the first dink is actually a better dink because it takes away the opponent's option of attacking the ball out of the air. Whereas with the second dink, the opponent can quite easily cut the ball off in the air and return it with an aggressive volley attack. Again, the difference maker here is that the first ball peaks before the net, and as it crosses the net, it's already on its way down. Okay, let's look at this next example. Now you might be confused as to why I'm comparing these two particular shots, because both balls peak before the net, both balls are on a downward trajectory as they cross the net, they both landed roughly in the same spot, and both balls cannot be attacked out of the air. Even though the first shot is a better dink overall because the ball bounces lower off the ground, making it an even harder ball to attack, but if you're just starting out in pickleball, I think there's an argument to be made here for the second shot being the better shot here. Why? Because the second shot clears the net with much more margin. You're going to have a much higher success rate making that shot over the net, and if you can consistently make this shot over and over again in your games, that in itself is a form of pressure that you'll be putting on your opponents. Then it's just a matter of time before your opponent's making a mistake before you do. So remember, the key here is not to make your dinks linear. Instead, focus on making sure the ball is going down the way as it crosses the net, and in order to do that, you want to aim the ball to be peaking half a foot or a foot before the net. And to make that easier, it helps to have your paddle face more open so you can hit the ball from underneath. Again, thank you for watching. This is Super Duper Pickleball. See you in the next video.